Guys, the Russians have started losing their mind and they've been making videos about me, literally filmed in front of the Kremlin for state TV, saying things like this.
So here, this is Colin Robertson. He's a young man with a YouTube channel and an admitted pro-Kiev bias who reports from the war in Kiev.
Okay, the reason I'm doing this video is because I want to show just how absurd and obscure Russian content is becoming. And I think I'm actually really getting under their skin. My reporting has got a huge amount of views recently, but I thought it'd be quite meta and quite fun to actually watch the stuff that they're making. And this isn't the only stuff, by the way. I've been hearing on local TV, local radio stations all across Russia, they have been using my reports and they have been talking non-stop nonsense about me. But this is on their flagship show. It's at 6 p.m. and it's on Russia Today. This is the biggest sort of English-speaking state-sponsored stuff that they're doing. So I thought I would watch this, respond to it, and we can do some commentary about what it actually means. But I mean, this is wild, guys. This is the top of Russian state TV, and they're making a report about the last time I went to Dobrobylia, a frontline town, and just listen to how ridiculous this is.
Now, this perfectly coiffed influencer calls himself a journalist. I'm going to let you decide.
I mean, I am a journalist because I don't take money from the Kremlin and I do journalism. Unlike this man.
His latest headline got my attention, right? It's one where he seems to go against his usual false narrative that he and others have long been feeding to Western news consumers that somehow... You've heard it, where they keep saying Ukraine is winning the war. They're destroying Russia's military. As a matter of fact, that's it. His headline. I've got bad news from the front lines, he's saying in his headlines.
I do have bad news from the front lines because him and Russians in Russia have been hammering the front line. In the most despicable way possible. But again, we're doing this right now because I genuinely want to show you just how ridiculous and honestly pathetic Russia really is as a state, as a nation, where they have to resort to attacks like this. And I know this might be a hard watch, but we're going to watch it together. We're all going to gather around and watch this together because I think more people should see just how ridiculous the state media is, the state of the country.
Interesting. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some of his report. We're going to watch it together, you and I, okay? He files his report from a place called Dobrobylia. It's a city that's now abandoned, by the way. It's likely going to be soon taken as well by the Russian army. It's in line, right? As the Russian army works its way toward Pokrovsk. Watch what he does here. I want you to listen and watch what he does here in his reporting.
Not only is this street now completely obliterated by a Russian glide bomb, but the entire...
God forbid I have sympathy for a town that has been bombed and walk around the devastation that basically the state media that he works for, the government that he works for, has done. God forbid.
The city is deserted. I cannot describe how busy this was last time I was here. And they put that bomb right into the center of this city, right into the center.
You see what he's doing right there? You see what he did? He tells you they put a glide bomb right in the city center. He doesn't tell you that the place where it hit...
I don't know if you can hear this. I'm staying in a hotel in Kyiv right now, and there are people laughing in the hallways. And that's quite fitting right now, because what this man's saying is literally hilarious and ridiculous.
Was abandoned, right? He doesn't tell you that it was already evacuated before the glide bomb hit. Right? He's making it sound like, well, now it's empty, but when the glide bomb hit, a bunch of people, he's leaving that impression. So the truth is the Russians were actually hitting probably some Ukraine soldiers who were still in the city, who were defending the town after the people had left. Or maybe the Russians just hit an empty building, which is very likely as well. We don't know yet.
The Russians hit an empty building. Okay, I think the reason that this struck a chord so much with Russians is because the more truthful my journalism actually gets, and I went to that town and it was devastated by what the Russians had just done. A glide bomb into the town center. This place was bustling last time I was there, bustling with life. Hot dog stands, some of the best hot dogs. I remember I wanted to buy I wanted to buy a part for my camera, and I asked 3 or 4 different shops if they had it, and one of the shopkeepers took me to a different part of that town to try and see if they had it. It was full of community and life, and the Russians put that bomb right into the town center. And I showed what they did, and they don't like that. And this is not the only report that I'm going to show you guys tonight as well about what the Russians are trying to cover up. But they know deep down, every single one of them, from these paid propagandists, this American guy, Rick Sanchez. Basically, he's a failed journalist in America. And what do you do when you fail in America as a journalist? You become a presenter for Russian state media. And this is what they do. They despise genuine reporting because they're almost projecting. They project because they hate what they could have become. He could have become a serious journalist. He could have become someone that actually tells the truth. But he decided instead that it was easier to take money from the Kremlin, who have been doing this. So this is what we're up against, guys. And the fact that he's American as well is just so sad.
He wants you to think that the Russians attacked a building with hundreds, if not thousands of people in it, civilians. I see this all the time. Listen again here how he tries to fool you. Listen to his words.
Tries to fool you, yeah.
Put that bomb.
That's all green screen, by the way, guys. That town center was absolutely fine when I was there. You know, I don't quite see how you can spin something like this.
Right into the center of this city, right into the center.
So right into the center, right? So what's interesting about his reporting, complete with soft piano music in the background, you know, is that he later admits, and I guess he forgot, that the town was abandoned. It appears he couldn't remember his own misstatement. Here it is.
So here we are, right in the center, and look, I'm the only person here in a lovely afternoon.
Facts.
So he's the only person there. There's nobody in the town, but then he tells you something else. So
But this is how ridiculous this is, guys. There's nobody in the town because the Russians put a bomb into the center of the town, so people were evacuated or they were killed. And I know this seems obvious as well, but this is the kind of stuff that the Kremlin pump into Russians' televisions every single day. Not just in Russia, though. This is an English-speaking Russian show that is going out in America. I had to download a VPN here in Ukraine to watch this garbage, obviously, as the Ukrainian government takes this kind of stuff very seriously. You know, people streaming this kind of stuff, but you can watch this in the US. And, you know, the Americans have just opened up flights to Belarus, and they've probably made it very easy to watch Russia today. But this is what people are watching. This is what people are believing. This is why I'm showing you this right now. I know this feels like a waste of time. And, you know, I'm going to go back to Kherson in a few days, and I'm doing a lot of on-the-ground reporting, but this is where brain rot comes from. And it's wild to see it.
You know, there he is telling us that the town is empty. He's right in the center, and there's no one there. So why is he talking about a glide bomb that hit the center? Center of what? An empty town?
The center of a bustling town. Anyway, we know this. This person is completely ludicrous. But a typical theme here is they always call me like perfectly coiffed, which I'm so sorry that I look nice in my videos. I mean, we'll get onto this in a second because another Russian comments on how I look as well. And this is kind of a theme that Russians like to do, is just to constantly berate how people look and present, because they don't really have much else. I mean, this is what I talk about when I talk about Russia. The only exports from Russia are oil and gas, diamonds, and lies. And this is the lies.
But again, listen to how he describes him.
With the city almost emptied out, there's almost no one to speak to us, except one shopkeeper who's kept his business open.
And this was really raw reporting, guys, as well. You know, there was no spin on this.
So what, are we stupid? Does this even make any sense? There's no one left in the town, but the shelves are completely full with groceries. This isn't reporting. What he's doing is creating a false narrative.
Unfortunately, guys, I went into the last shop that was remaining in Dobrobylia where there were still items on the shelves, which proves that there is no war going on in the east of Ukraine. You know, this is the logic. Anyway, I'm not going to put you through this entire process, but I just thought I'd show you how ludicrous this stuff is, because if a lot of you live in sensible countries that have VPNs and you don't have a VPN and you ban this kind of stuff, you won't see what's coming out of here. But I mean, I think it really shows that I'm getting under their skin. I mean, they really they really have been upping the game recently, especially as my views have been going up. I've had 20 million views this month on Instagram, talking about what Russia's doing. And I'm on some sort of radar, especially when I went to Kursk and showed what a shithole Russia is. They really didn't like it, but this is just ludicrous, right?
Did he just say in Afghanistan before we...
So, you know, I was with this amazing volunteer from the Netherlands who also volunteered in Afghanistan. And he's like, well, this is all the CIA coup, guys. This is Afghanistan. He was in Afghanistan. That means that's why he's in Ukraine, and it's all an American operation. And the saddest thing is, this is an American doing it. Right, let's skip right to the end here for his little finale.
If you get a sense that you're being gaslit when you watch this guy's report like I did, guess what? You are. The story is so filled with lies, I don't know where to grab the next one.
Projection is always on display watching Russia Today. To end with that, I'll give him that one. It's pretty bold. It's pretty iconic. But it's not just Russians doing this from Moscow. This is also Russians doing this from Lisbon who have been attacking me. There is a very big Russian YouTuber who's anti-war, who decided to make a hit piece on me yesterday because his views are down about 95%. He used to have 1 million followers trying to be a singer before the war broke out. That failed. So now he's kind of just doing hit pieces on random people. This person is called Roman. And having a quick look at his recent videos, it's usually him complaining about how annoyed he is that he has a Russian passport and it's hard to get around in Europe, that you get questioned at checkpoints and going through airports, because he is a perpetual victim like most Russians. And he has decided to make a Kaelin Robertson exposed video because I said that most Russians, not all, but most, because I was actually excluding him in this, are quite indifferent to this war, which I think they are. Look, I mean, there have been books that have been written for decades about, and one of them is called The Russians, and it was written by a New York Times bestseller from a guy that went and lived in Russia and interviewed everyone he possibly could, from the peasants to the oligarchs, and he found that there was an indifference to human life, and he found that there was a core sense of imperialism throughout the whole of Russia. And so I've always said, you know, look, the opposition to Putin, Navalny, was pretty indifferent to the invasion of Crimea, was pretty indifferent to what happened in 22. And his wife is now basically a Russian nationalist. I mean, she puts out Russian nationalist content. She supports the referendums that take place by gunpoint in the Donbass. So I say, look, it's difficult because it's not going to end at Putin. It's going to end at all Russians. But this struck a chord with this man, this Russian man who lives in Lisbon. And he decided to make an entire 20-minute hit piece on me in an attempt to generate YouTube ad revenue. And I thought I would go through it now as well, because there's a few things I want to chat about as well. He brings up my past, which I've always been very open about. But let's just take a look at it for a second.
As a Russian person who's hated the Russian government for pretty much my entire adult life, and as somebody who did not agree with the war in Ukraine and who ended up leaving Russia, I had to...
Left Russia because life became annoying and difficult for him because of sanctions, obviously, and also didn't want to be drafted.
Through a lot of difficulties and make a lot of sacrifices.
Instantly opens with being a victim. That's a little Russian. That sounds a little Russian to me.
The EU now, and even though a lot of people in the West are pretty supportive of Russians that are trying to escape the regime and build a new life for them.
But this is as well, I'm like, it's quite funny because it's like, it's all about him being a victim and how difficult his life is, how difficult it is, and how it's the EU's fault that Russians can't get passports. Well, maybe it's your government's fault for illegally invading Ukraine, Georgia, and launching a hybrid war on the rest of Europe. Maybe for a second you could stop thinking about yourself, Roman, and actually have some sympathy for the people on the receiving end of your country's behavior. But I guess he decided against that, maybe because, well, look, there's no YouTube ad revenue in that.
Some people seem to think differently.
The only Russian refugees that fled the country were Amazon refugees.
Facts.
I call them. These are people who didn't care what they did in Georgia, Syria, the Middle East, and Crimea.
Facts.
Ukraine. But as soon as sanctions started coming in and they couldn't order McDonald's to their house, they couldn't get their Amazon packages, then it's a step too far.
Facts.
Yeah, honestly, it's pretty hurtful to hear stuff like this.
And that is the crux to this. Because I spoke to Roman on the phone after this, who has now declined a debate and a conversation because he realizes that he would be destroyed in that. And he basically said, that it struck a chord, that it annoyed him, because he is an Amazon refugee. He fled Russia because he didn't want to get drafted, and he didn't like how difficult it had become to live in Russia. And now he makes YouTube videos bashing pro-Ukraine journalists. Let's take a step back for a second and look at what he has uploaded in the last month. He has uploaded about 6 or 7 videos, all about how difficult it is to live in the EU, all about how difficult it is for him. Russia launched 20 drones into NATO's airspace, and he said nothing about it, which is odd. Russia launched 800 drones into Kyiv, into Ukraine recently, and he made no videos about it. Russia launched drones that blew up half of the British consulate building and have escalated this beyond belief in the last month. I was filming the aftermath of this. And guess what? Roman didn't make a video about it. Instead, he decided to make a video bashing one of the only pro-Ukraine journalists that permanently lives there. And I think for a second, that's worth noting. That's worth remembering. That's what Roman would like to spend his time doing. Bashing pro-Ukraine journalists rather than talking about what his country is doing, invading NATO's airspace and killing Ukrainians every day. But I don't think he cares about that. Again, there's not much ad revenue to be made in talking about Putin's war crimes.
Have all of your struggles and all of your beliefs completely dismissed.
Even the Russian opposition still has that mindset, still has the Soviet mindset of the motherland of Russia and colonialism.
It hurts to be told that no matter what you do and no matter what you believe in, you're still like somehow a Putin supporter.
Well, yeah, I mean, it should hurt.
Russian imperialist that is hiding in plain sight, wishing to take over Europe at any moment. And when I hear this,
he's still talking about himself.
Opinion from a Ukrainian usually, I think to myself, that's just sad, but it makes sense why they might say that, because Russia is literally invading them right now. But I do think that it's a little ironic to be told this by a British journal.
Another point of this is very similar to what Russia Today put out, lies. I'm actually Irish, and I have Irish in all of my bios and Irish in all the articles I've written. So immediately from the get-go, he has absolutely no idea what he's talking about, and he's just filling this video with lies. I'm Irish.
Who as late as the year 2019 literally created like anti-immigration, Islamophobic, alt-right content he himself describes as alt-right, by the way. It is really funny to hear this from a person who was busy creating content with Tommy Robinson and who did not have a...
But this is interesting. So look, I talk about this in every interview that I've ever done. When I did my interview with Jake Bro at Christmas, when I did my interviews well before that, and the New York Times, I'm very honest about my past. And I think my past actually gives me a good perspective on the present and the future and what's happening in this country. And just to briefly go over it, because I think facts are important. Unlike Roman and unlike Russia Today, I think actually facts are very important. In 2016, the Orlando shooting happened. 50 gay people were killed in a nightclub. I came out as gay when I was very, very young, and I had a lot of questions about it. I was watching the mainstream media, and I didn't hear much discourse or dialogue about why that was happening, about the ideology of the shooter, who happened to be Muslim. And I started genuinely being worried, thinking that tolerance in the West could be eroded by something that could be imported. And I started to really dislike Islam. I thought that it was a threat to myself and to other gay people and to women's rights. And I started making videos about it. I got hired by the rebel media to talk about it. And I only did that job for about 6 to 8 months before I realized that the people that were perpetuating this stuff, the people at the top of the industry, people like Andrew Tate, who I had met, people like my former boss, who I'd met, Ezra Levant from Rebel, didn't believe a word that they were talking about. All they cared about was money and algorithms, a bit like Roman. And that made me realize that even if I had legitimate questions, even if I genuinely thought that tolerance could be eroded because of a foreign ideology, this wasn't the right path to go down. So what I did, and this is what you can check online, and I talk about this all the time, is I exposed those people I worked with. I exposed Tommy Robinson. I exposed the associations with Alex Jones. I wrote about it in The Independent. I exposed the finances. I showed the shady Russian networks, and it gave me an insight into how Kremlin money funnels disinformation in Europe. And I'm very good friends with Bill Browder, and I've interviewed him multiple times. He's great. And he's very good at talking about Russia because he used to work with Putin and he knows the inner workings of Russia as a mafia state. That's why he's written so many books about it, and that's why he's a great voice about it. And in some ways, I see myself in the same way. Someone that was very, very young, 8, 9 years ago, who was involved in, I guess, disinformation, right-wing, kind of Kremlin-aligned talking points. And so I see how evil it is, I see how destructive it is, and I know how it works. And that's why I was good at taking down Phidias, because I know what he's about. That's why I was good at taking down Tim Pool in my videos, because I know how it works. And that's also why I know exactly what the fuck Roman is doing right now, because he's part of that. But it's interesting for him to say that because of my past, something that happened a very, very long time ago, that I should feel guilt. Because I think deep down, Roman realizes that because he is a Russian and always will be, that he's guilty about it, that he feels, you know, a bit ashamed. He's annoyed that he can't get through the Schengen as easily as he'd like to. And he's throwing this at me. But I have, unlike him, I genuinely have nothing to hide. I've always been honest about my past, always. I've written about it for years. I set up Byline TV. I didn't just leave the right and come to Ukraine. I left the right and I set up Byline TV, which is a liberal news outlet in London. And I spent 5 years making hundreds of video reports talking about disinformation, Russian disinformation, anti-far right disinformation. At the time I started it in 2020, it was about COVID denial disinformation. And it was dismantling the type of stuff that I was associated with. And so I've got a good track record of dismantling what I used to do, but Roman is weaponizing that against me. And I think that's really sad. And I think it's also sad to say that I was British, which is not true. And so I should feel bad for having a colonialist past. Well, the only country on earth that exists that is the closest to the peak of British colonialism back in the 1700s is Russia, by being an imperialist nation. And he is Russian, so this is projection.
Single word to say about Russia or Ukraine before 2023 and who probably never knew where these countries even are on the map.
Then it's a step.
Well, in 2021 and 2022, I was talking about how Russian disinformation networks were funneling news feeds all across our news feeds, and how the Lebedevs had bought the London Evening Standard and how dangerous it all was. So I knew exactly what I was talking about. In 2023, Roman was trying to be a singer, and I think that we're just different people, guys.
Then they decided to flee Russia because they don't care.
And I do think it's really funny that actually I am apparently the one who did not care. A Russian person who's been publicly outspoken about the government since at least 2015. I only left Russia because there is no more McDonald's and stuff. So hey there people, it is your boy Roman, your favorite neighborhood Russian, and welcome to a brand new video in which we'll talk about the ex-alt-right pro-Ukraine grifter Kalen Robertson and react to...
I think it's always interesting as well about grifting, because it's like, I could make a lot more money still being in the far right. I could make a lot more money still living a great, comfortable life in London. But I decided in 2023 that I wanted to leave that life behind and move to Odessa, move to Ukraine full time on a tiny budget. I only have Patreon as my income because I wanted to tell these stories. I wanted to report from the front lines. I wanted to show what was really going on. And it's difficult and it's expensive and it's hard. Every trip that I go to costs so much money. So what is grifting? If it costs you everything. Look, I don't think I'm going to show you this whole video. It's been 23 minutes already. But I think that this highlights a bigger problem right now. And it's, if you speak out against Russia, there is always going to be a huge backlash, whether that's from fake anti-Russians, anti-war Russians like Roman here, or whether that is from Russia Today directly, whether it's indirectly or direct. And I know this is a bit negative and it's not the normal kind of reporting that I do, but I just thought I would react to a bit of this and show you this and just say, I've always been honest about my life and my past. I contacted Roman and we had a long phone call, and now he's refusing to do an interview and a conversation and a debate. And I think he's terrified because he knows that I would expose him for all of this stuff. And he's decided to make this long video to try and destroy me. And it's like, what is your purpose? What is your purpose in life? If you're an anti-war Russian and Russia has killed so many people in the last month and Russia has flown drones into NATO's airspace, this is what you create, this? And I've never spoken to him before. This is what he does? Make up your own mind on who's the real grifter here. But anyway, I've got to go because actually, unlike Roman, I've got journalism to do. I've got to go to Kherson next week. I've got my Estonia documentary to edit. And if you want to support my work, hit up my Patreon. If not, I'm helping out getting a couple of trucks from Estonia to Ukraine right now with Help 99, and they're amazing. And I'll put the link in the description below because I would actually like to help Ukraine in a very tangible way. So there we go. Not the video I expected to make, but it raises a lot of questions, and I think it answers a lot of questions as well. But no, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I can't wait. I'm finally back in Ukraine. I just went to Ireland to premiere my Kherson documentary and show people in Ireland what was going on, and now I'm back here on the ground. I'll be filming full time, and I can't wait to bring you more daily reports. So I hope you have a fantastic day, and thank you so much for watching.